Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the MIT Alumni Irish Whiskey Masterclass. It is my pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is Kevin McCumber. I'm an MIT alum, class of 2005 undergraduate, 2011 PhD, and this is a passion of mine, fine spirits. I run food and beverage events for the MIT Alumni Club of Boston, and with the recent move to online events, we've been opening these up to all MIT alumni, and I assume that's why folks are here from outside the Boston area. So very, very excited to have kind of a larger reach and to meet a lot of folks that we wouldn't have met otherwise. I want to thank a number of folks tonight. I'd like to thank the MIT Club of Boston, first and foremost, for continuing to support these events, as well as the other MIT clubs across the country and around the world who have helped to publicize our events. Very much appreciated to help get the word out. And I'd like to thank the Alumni Association at MIT for connecting all the clubs and making sure that we're always on top of what each other are doing. I also want to thank Dom and Alex. So Alex Thibault was originally slated to be our expert for the evening, but unfortunately was not able to make it tonight. He did do a lot of work to make sure that we had sample packs available as much as we could. People could get connected with full-size bottles as much as they could. Responded to a lot of emails about that. So really appreciate Alex's work getting tonight going. And then when we found out he wasn't able to make it, appreciate Dom stepping in and taking the helm to make sure that this event goes across the finish line tonight. So thank you both. I also want to thank Pernod Ricard, the parent company that they work for. Pernod is one of the largest spirits manufacturers in the world, and recently turned a lot of their distilleries into hand sanitizer production facilities and donated a lot of that hand sanitizer to communities that otherwise would not have access to hand sanitizer. So appreciate what they do for people who are fighting the pandemic. And finally, I want to thank all of you as attendees, my fellow alumni and guests of alumni. It's always great to see you. I appreciate you're taking the time out of your day, a Friday night, to be with us. And I really hope that these events tonight and all the other ones that we do are fun and they're educational for you, and that you come away with something, that you didn't have going into it. So again, my pleasure to be with you this evening. Thank you so much. Let's talk about the agenda for the evening. It's a pretty simple agenda. I'm going to do a brief introduction to whiskey as a category, and then I'll hand it over to Dom, who will be doing a deep dive into Irish whiskey in particular. After Dom's presentation, we'll be doing a question and answer session. And then following that, we'll do breakouts. And if you're not familiar with breakouts, this is where we'll get into groups of 5 or 6 through the magic of the online community. And we'll actually be able to chat with each other. So we'll meet our fellow attendees, talk about what's in our glass, and just get to know each other on a more personal level than is generally possible today. If you're a little bit of an introvert like me, sometimes the breakouts can be a bit daunting, but I definitely recommend that you give them a try if you've never done them before. I think it's a lot of fun to get to meet other folks and get to learn usually about something new that you wouldn't have gotten just from a kind of a webinar type format. Okay, no tasting would be complete without a good after party. Dom has graciously agreed to stay with us tonight for some time after the stated end time of the event in case there are more questions. So we'll come back after the breakouts, and for those who choose to stay, we will just be doing kind of a group question and answer and chat with Dom. We'll be able to unmute folks and do questions and everything like that with Dom. Yes, this event is being recorded and it will be available after the event. That's the #1 question. So we're going to post this on the MIT Club of Boston's YouTube channel, barring any unforeseen technical glitches. That should be available within a day or so, and I will send out an email after the event with that link, so you'll be able to see that. In that email, there will also be a link to a survey, and I would greatly appreciate it if you can fill out that survey to give me some feedback on how this event went and what you'd like to see in future events. And as you know, this event is free to attend. but we do ask that you consider supporting MIT's COVID-19 response funds. These are funds that go to help MIT's research efforts, as well as those in the MIT community who were affected by the pandemic. So I hope you join me in making a contribution to one or more of those funds. I'll also be sending that link that you see to the funds out in the post-event email. Since we have such a large group tonight, we can't just do kind of open outcry questions. Instead, we're asking that you submit them through an online portal. This is the same one that we used at our last event, the Science of Chocolate event, and it worked fairly well, so we're doing it again. Go to meet.ps/MIT Irish Whiskey. You also have that link in the pre-event email that I sent to you if you aren't able to note it down here. Should be easy to submit your question. You can also upvote questions that others have asked, and then I'll cherry pick those and pose them to Dom. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible and appreciate your understanding if we're not able to answer your question, but of course, Dom and I will be available after the event for any follow-up questions over email that you'd like to ask. All right, this is the portion of the evening where I like to get to know the audience a little bit better. So we have a poll here, which I've gotten fairly proficient at launching over the course of these. So we've got this poll with 5 questions. Starts with a little question about you. You should be seeing it on your screen now. Where you're located in your MIT class year. If you have multiple class years, pick your favorite. Your Irish whiskey experience level. This is not a scientifically based poll and there's no quiz, so you can pick whichever one makes you feel good. What you're drinking tonight, and if you've ever heard of Redbreast prior to this event. So we'll see how much Dom has his work cut out for him. All right, I'll give a few seconds to complete the survey. Dom, you don't get to vote. You'd be breaking the expert category. Off the charts. We don't have a category for you. All right. It looks like, wow, this is a very good crowd. Lots of folks voting. Looks like we're close to full capacity on the votes. So I'm going to give it about 2 more seconds. Apologies if I end up cutting you off, but it looks like we've trailed off. So I'm going to end that and share the results. So you should be seeing the results on your screen. It looks like about 2/3 of folks are from the Eastern time zone. Of course, pretty strong Massachusetts showing. MIT class year, predominantly the 1980s are taking first place, and then not MIT alumni are second. And of course, we welcome non-MIT alumni as guests and as friends for all of these events. Always happy to have folks learn and join us for a sociable hour. Irish whiskey experience level, 3/4 saying novice, which is awesome. I love having events where folks are new or almost new to these because that means hopefully you'll learn a lot. And what are you sampling tonight? 1 or more Redbreast bottlings. Wow, 80%. That is way higher than any other event that we've done with how many people are sampling the product that is being used for the recommended tasting. I hope that's due to the wider distribution of the full-size bottles in the sample packs. That's great. And then have you ever heard of Redbreast before? The 60% saying you've not heard of it. So it sounds like a lot of folks are being introduced to this for the first time, which is also good because again, we like learning. I do want to clarify, I got a couple questions before the event. What's the reason for picking Redbreast? That was me personally. I am personally a fan of Redbreast. I'm not compensated in any way. I'm not paid by anyone to do these events. It's a hobby. I really like Redbreast, and I think it's the best, if not one of the best, pure single pot still whiskeys on the market. So I went out and seeked out Redbreast for this event, and I hope that you'll agree that you enjoy it. It's also nice that they have a sample pack that makes things a lot easier. All right, so that's it for the polls. Thanks for your answers to that. Really good to see that a lot of folks are able to enjoy what we're kind of sampling tonight. Many of you also know this is a part of a series of events, especially fine spirits events that we've been putting on through the MIT Club of Boston. And I wanted to give you a sneak preview of events we have in the hopper. Coming up 3 weeks from tonight, is a Scotch whiskey blending workshop with Holly Sidewan. She's a dynamo in the world of whiskey, originally based here in the Boston area, now in New York. This is a really cool event because, like tonight, we're going to have a sampling kit. It's actually for folks in Massachusetts. We have a blending kit that is specially made by Holly and is available to all alumni in Massachusetts. If you're outside Massachusetts, you can readily find the bottles that we'll be sampling at that event in pretty much any market. But I'm really excited to have this blending kit. Even comes with a pipette. It's totally MIT. It's only for this event. It's only for MIT alumni. I kind of had to pull a few strings, but we made it happen. So really excited about that in 3 weeks. Then in early September, we're doing a rum masterclass with our fellow alumnus, Eduardo Bacardi, who is the 6th generation of the Bacardi family of the Bacardi rum fame in Puerto Rico. He's now with an artisanal rum brand called Ron del Barrilito, and he'll be telling us about that brand as well as rum in general, and even giving us a virtual tour of his distillery. And in October, we're doing a panel discussion with MIT alumni who are now working in the food and beverage industry, talking about their career paths and what they're seeing in the future and currently in the food and beverage industry, which should be especially interesting given that they're MIT alumni and no strangers to a lot of data analysis. So that's what we have coming up, a lot of other events in the works. And if you'd like to stay in touch about what we have coming up, 2 options for you. One is to join my email list. It's a private list I maintain of folks who have attended events. I'll send that link to sign up in my post-event email. You can also join the MIT Alumni Fine Spirit Society on Facebook. This is a group that we set up a couple months ago to keep us connected in between events. I also publicize events there. And I'm doing a little bit of kind of Q&A with folks out there too, to find out what people are interested in. So again, that link will be coming out in the post-event email as well. All right, enough of the front matter. Let's talk about whiskey. So I'm going to talk about the basic process of how to make whiskey and how to taste whiskey. Then I'm going to hand it over to Dom, who is hopefully a much better speaker than I am, to take us into the world of Irish whiskey. So how's whiskey in general made? Again, this is painting with broad strokes. Whiskey starts with, like any other fine distilled spirits, the raw ingredients. In the case of whiskey, that is grain. The raw ingredients, the grain, can be prepared. Sometimes it's roasted, like in the case of malted barley, but it's always ground up. And then in the second step that we're showing here, that ground up grain is put into hot water. The hot water extracts sugar. And in step 3, yeast is added to that sugary liquid. The yeast consumes the sugar and puts off alcohol. So at the end of step 3, you essentially have beer without the hops. In step 4, that beer is put into what's called a still. A still is a metal vessel that is heated to a point at which primarily alcohol boils off and water does not. So now you're left with a high alcohol content vapor, and that vapor is condensed, cooled, back down into liquid form into a high alcohol content liquid. In step 5, that high alcohol content liquid is put into a wooden barrel or a cask to age for some amount of time. And one of the most basic things you should know about whiskey if you're a novice is that whiskey only ages in the barrel, okay? So if there's an age on the whiskey like a Redbreast 12 or a Redbreast 15, that means it spent at least 12 or 15 years in a wooden barrel or cask. And in the vast majority of cases, those casks have previously held a different type of alcoholic beverage. In most cases, that's either bourbon, which is a high corn whiskey from the United States, or sherry, which is a high alcohol content wine from Spain. And those different previous contents of the cask lend flavors to the whiskey as it matures. After the whiskey is done maturing, in step 6 is put into a bottle and distributed for consumption. And I'm sorry to say, whiskey does not age in the bottle. So if you're going to, say, a relative's house and you discover a dusty bottle of whiskey in the back of their cabinet, unfortunately, that has not continued to age. It is the same whiskey, assuming the cork still has its integrity, as it was the day it was put in the bottle. Going down to the primary grains in whiskey, barley is one of the most prevalent. Again, malting barley means roasting it. Malted barley can be combined with unmalted barley to make the style that we're especially going to explore tonight, and that is single pot still, and in this case, single pot still Irish whiskey. Corn is also prevalent, for example, bourbon in the United States, rye as well, for example, rye whiskey in the United States or in Canada. Corn, rye, and wheat are also used to make blended whiskeys, such as Jameson, which is a blended Irish whiskey that pretty much everybody is familiar with. You know, tonight is July 17th. We're only 4 months late to St. Patty's Day. I say better late than never, so it's good to be doing some Irish whiskey tonight. All right. Hopefully you've already gotten started drinking. That helps you listen to me a little bit. If you haven't, I'm going to take you through how to taste whiskey very briefly. 4 steps: appearance, nose, palate, and finish. We'll start with the appearance. This is honestly the part that I get the least enjoyment out of. But if you take your whiskey and look at it in your glass, note what is its color. The darker it is, typically that means the more mature it is, the older it is. Not always the case, and I'm sure Don can explain more about that. You can also notice the viscosity. If it kind of rolls down the glass relatively slowly, that means it's more viscous, likely higher alcohol content. Then we get to the steps that I think are the most fun. The nose. This is the smell. So I like to take a couple whiffs of it, and I tend to keep my nose a little bit away from the glass and even inhale a little bit of air through my mouth to kind of dilute the high alcohol content vapor that you're getting off the whiskey. The smell should tell you a lot about what you're going to taste in the whiskey, because taste is actually mostly made up of sense of smell. Another interesting point about sense of smell is that it's very strongly tied to our memory. I've had a lot of whiskeys that have reminded me of things from my childhood that I completely forgot until I had that whiskey. Of course, then the whiskey made me forget other things, but that's another matter. The next step then is to actually take a sip of it. Note the flavor, move it around in your mouth. Note how it feels. Is it viscous? Is it thin? Is it hot? Is it prickly? Is it smooth? That taste, as well as the mouthfeel, the sensation, that's called the palate. I like to smack it a little bit, even get a little air over it. Helps it get up into your nose again, because sense of smell is so important to sense of taste. Then finally, on the finish, we swallow it. Note the taste, the experience. Again, very similar to the palate. What are you tasting? What are you feeling? And how long does it last? Is it short, or does it go on for a long amount of time? That's the finish. Now, if you read any whiskey magazines or reviews online, you often come across really highfalutin language to try to describe all the flavors and experiences in whiskey. The most important thing about whiskey, 1, is it shouldn't be pretentious, and 2, you should just say whether you like it or not. That's the most important thing at the end of the day. Do you like the whiskey? Your tasting notes don't have to be fancy. Mine definitely are not. I like this. This is good. This is smooth. This is bitter. I don't like this. This one went down the sink. You know, any of that, that's a fine tasting note. Because at the end of the day, whiskey is a personal experience. All right, enough from me. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Dom Venegas, who joins us from Pernod Ricard. Again, originally we had Alec Thibault, whom I again like to say thanks to for getting so much of the legwork done on this event. And then Dom graciously stepped in to take his place. And we're looking forward to having Dom with us for this evening to make the first presentation of Redbreast to the MIT alumni audience. So Dom, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That was it's a pleasure to be here in front of you all for MIT. Like Kevin said, this was just put into my lap about 2 weeks ago. And for those of you that are paying attention, I have 2 cameras on because one of my cameras on my computer is broken. So I'm using my iPad to look at for you guys. But enough about me. I'm going to be showing a little PowerPoint anyway about our distillery. But to let you guys know, my name is Dominic Venegas. I am one of the whiskey ambassadors for the United States for Pernod Ricard whiskeys. I am here talking to you about Irish distillers today. So that means Middleton Distillery, which I do have the pleasure of speaking about Jameson, Powers, Redbreast, Green Spot, Middleton, and all of those great whiskeys and gin that come out of this distillery, as well as the Glenlivet, Aberlour, Chivas Brothers, which means about 20 other whiskeys. And we do have our American whiskeys now too. So we have Smooth Ambler, we do have Rabbit Hole in Kentucky, and we also have Jefferson's for those of you that are really into your bourbon and your wood finishes. During this time, we're going to go over some stuff. Kevin, I want to thank you very much, because usually I got to go through the fermentation, distillation, grain stuff, and you know, it gets repetitive, and sometimes it's hard to know what everyone out there knows. Some people are novices, and some people have been drinking and know, and then some people have been drinking all their lives and have no idea what they're drinking, right? Kevin gave some great points about tasting and drinking. What I like to tell people is you always want to taste your spirit or your beer or anything that you're actually tasting twice. That first one to get your mouth used to the ABV or what you're drinking. Second one is because you're going to get more of that flavor because your palate is now used to that, right? Also, I'm on the West Coast, so it's still a little early for me. You guys are in dinner mode on the East Coast, and for those of you that are around the world, well, we're all at different places in our day. So I don't know if you've had a lot of coffee today, smoked cigarettes, had burritos. So our palates are going to be all over the place. If this tasting was in the morning, it'd be a little fresher, and we could actually kind of probably have similar flavor profiles in our tastes. So now we've been listening to a lot of talking right now, so I just want to real quick just get the Redbreast 12 out that you do have. And for those of you that do have the big bottles, I really appreciate it. For those of you that have the tri-packs, which are mainly probably, I think, sold only in Massachusetts and California, thank you very much for going out and getting them. We will be discussing every single Redbreast that we do have, as well as any other whiskey that you have questions about coming out of Middleton Distillery. I don't have them all, but I can talk about mainly all of them. You know, during this time, I've been doing a lot of tasting, so some of them have just gone away, and then some of them I just haven't been able to get. But first, we have the Redbreast 12. So I just want to get this in your mouth so you know that we're drinking. It's Friday night, right? So let's have a good time. Please reach out to Kevin if you have any questions at all. There is no dumb questions. I've been doing this for a long time. And to give you a little bit background, first of all, as we say, sláinte. Cheers. What is my background? Who am I? Why is this guy that's not Irish talking to us about Irish whiskey? Well, like I said, my name's Dominic. I've worked around the country doing bar programs around the country. Last place I did was in New York City, and it was the Nomad Hotel. We're known mostly for our cocktails and our spirit selection, as well as our wine list and our food program. But I'm very much a whiskey nerd, a spirits nerd. It could be tequila, it could be brandy. We could talk about beer. I could talk to you about coffee, tea, any kind of beverage is pretty much my background. About 5 years ago, I was offered the job of a lifetime from Pernod Ricard to come and be an educator for their whiskey brands, which at first it was just their scotches. So now they've opened it up to their whole portfolio because they just like the way that I tell my stories. And I'm also very honest about our history and about our brands. We are a lot of huge brands, as I said before, some of those like Jameson. Jameson pretty much keeps the lights on for Redbreast and all these other Irish whiskeys that we have. But they're a big company. We're a global company. I'm one little guy here in the US, but there's probably about 25 of me around the world. We have 5 here in the United States. So feel free, ask any questions. I'm up for it. We're really into this. And like I said, my passion is cocktails and everything, so I can answer your questions if you have any questions about drinks or anything like that. All right, now first off, let's start about Irish whiskey history. All right, so Irish whiskey. A lot of people are like, who started making whiskey first, Ireland or Scotland? Well, I'm here to tell you that it was Ireland first. Scotland wasn't that far behind, but it will be down to the economics and the laws of each country. Now I can tell you, because the Irish and because the Scottish were both part of the UK, but not originally British, they had laws that they had legislations that saying who could make the whiskey and who couldn't make the whiskey. So in 1556, this is where we're starting. We're going back because this is a master's class, so I want to give you that master's education. So 1556, this is when they passed a law saying that only gentlemen can make whiskey. Gentlemen and freemen of the larger towns. So, you know, they had everyone at this point was making whiskey, because remember, it only takes 3 things in the world, 4 things if we really think about it, but 3 things to make water, a grain of some sort. So here in the United States, we have corn and rye. Ireland, Scotland, we also have corn and rye, wheat, but mainly we use barley, right? You need water, and then you need yeast. water, we have rivers, we have springs, yeast is wild. And then all you need is oak or some kind of wood, which the law in Ireland is it has to be aged for 3 years in a wood cask. All right. If we're talking about Scotland, 3 years in an oak cask. It's a big difference. And it gives a lot of freedom to a lot of the, I would say for Ireland, we going through our history, we've used Hungarian oak, Irish oak, Scottish oak, American oak. I can go on and on and on. And now we can now use different things. Now in Scotland, we can only use oak, right? Now through the history, we've been known for using French, European oak. Once World War II hit, we started using American oak. Now last year, actually just last September, we passed a law in Scotland saying that we now can use oak that has been used to finish other spirits or wines. So before we were allowed to use wines, just not as many, but now we can use Hungarian Tokai, we can use tequila barrels, we can use rum barrels, we can use rye barrels. So everything's going out there, all right? Now, okay, going back to 1556, now saying who can control. So the British had a lot of control over what could happen, obviously, in their colonies. Now, in 1682, we're going up about 130 years, what happened again is that the British said, okay, you guys are making too much whiskey. They put an excise tax on malted barley. So they had said that anyone's making whiskey with malted barley, you have to pay a 10% tax. Now for all of those people, now let's just say all of you are a community, all of you are making whiskey. Now, like I said, all of those things, you grow your own grain, you have water in your backyard, and yeast is wild. You're not buying anything from the government or taking anything, so why do you have to pay taxes on this? Well, the natives got really restless and said, well, the hell with you guys. What we're gonna do to our regular core recipe, which is gonna be malted barley, water, and yeast, they started adding regular barley, so unmalted barley. That mixes people up, just barley. So never been malted. So if we don't know what malted barley is gonna be a grain barley that's gonna be pretty much just saturated in water. We want it to sprout, and we want it to sprout to get those sugars going. Now we're gonna take those sugars and we're gonna ferment those sugars, and that's what's gonna cause the alcohol, and then we go into distillation, right? So what happened by them adding barley into that mash bill, it made a richer spirit. This was a happy accident. This was something that they didn't really think that would happen. Now, by law, whiskey in Ireland does not have to be triple distilled, but the whiskey that we always talk about is triple distilled. There are distilleries in Ireland that do double distillation. Also, in Scotland, there are distillers that are single malt producers or blended Scotch producers that do triple distillation, whereas mainly we do double distillation in Scotland. That's kind of the joke between Scotland and Ireland is the Scottish say they got it right the second time, the Irish had to do it the third time. We'll go into that and talk about that, why they do that third time, and why here in the United States we only do it once. Sorry, I'm having a Guinness. Yes, it's an Irish day for me, so I might as well get that going. All right, so if we don't have any questions, I'm gonna keep on going. We're gonna keep going. So 1682, when that happened, it pretty much developed single pot still whiskey. Now by law, now this is the Irish laws of 1980, so that's not too long ago for a lot of us. So in 1980, they said, okay, so Irish whiskey by law has to be with malted barley. Malted barley, water, yeast, and aged in oak barrel or aged in wood barrels. Now by age, just like in Scotland, if there's an age statement on that label, 12 years, that's the youngest whiskey in that bottle. That doesn't mean that everything in this bottle is 12 years old, but nothing younger than 12 years old is gonna be in this bottle, all right? Now that's the law for Scotland as well. Now when you see a bottle that does not have an age statement on it, which I'm sure for all of us in the last 10 years have noticed it's a big trend within not just Scotland and Ireland, but here in the United States, it's been Japan as well. And those laws they're not here in the United States or in Japan. So you can say what you want about that. But if it doesn't have an age statement on it in Scotland and Ireland, remember what I said, by law, it has to be 3 years old. But saying that doesn't mean that it's 3-year-old whiskey. Now, if I did that in marketing and I put a 3-year-old because that's the youngest, and by law I have to put that if I'm putting an age statement on my label. If I was an American and I said a 3-year-old Irish whiskey, why would I buy that? You know, whereas we understand now flavor goes a long way and younger whiskeys have a lot of flavor. All right, so let's go back into it. So now we're going back into the 1800s. So in the 1800s, What we're talking about now is 1820s. 1820s, we have a distillery down in Cork owned by the Murphy family, and that's opening, called Middleton Distillery. Now at the same time, up in Dublin, so we're going 2 hours north up to Dublin, we're gonna have pretty much what is perceived as Dublin style whiskey. So you have John Jameson, you have John Powers, and you have about 90 other distilleries throughout Ireland that are making pot still Irish whiskey. Now, I'm going to keep on bringing up pot still because I want people to understand that that's a big part of Ireland. And I say this because all of us, when we go into any bar or restaurant, we look at the menu and it says American whiskey, and it'll say all the different kinds of American whiskey. Same with Scotch. It'll say single grain, blended, single malt, right? And then it'll say Ireland, and it just says Ireland, right? It doesn't say single malt. It doesn't say single grain. It doesn't say blended. It doesn't say peated, non-peated. These are all whiskey styles. It doesn't say single pot still. These are all styles of whiskey that we have in Ireland, right? And these are all styles of whiskey that we make at Middleton Distillery. Middleton Distillery is the biggest whiskey distillery in the world. We produce a lot of whiskeys. A lot of the whiskeys that you may have heard of, like Paddy's, Tullamore Dew. We did produce Bushmills for a little while. We've produced every single whiskey in Ireland at some point. And for any new whiskey that comes through or starts to develop in Ireland, our master distillers and team help them develop. You've heard of other, like Connemara. Connemara is a peated whiskey, but they do that because that's their style. I will tell you that any whiskey that comes out of our distillery is not peated. We do not use any kind of earth to dry our whiskey, or dry our barley, I should say. We use hot air. That's it. So when you think about a peated whiskey like Connemara or Lafroig or Lagavulin, they're using earth, or as we say, peat, and that peat is going to impart that smoky flavor into that barley because it's drying it. Now for us here in the United States, same thing. We just use hot air. We don't want to impart any flavor. We just want that barley to come through, or that corn and that rye. I just want to get that through because a lot of people don't understand, because they'll still taste Redbreast and say, hey, there's some smoke in this. It's not the smoke. That's the oak that's coming through into that wood or into that spirit that's coming. All right, now I've been talking a lot. Let's start drinking, all right? Now, we got the Redbreast 12. We got that in the mouth. I know that for all of us, the way that we describe this in Europe when I'm doing tastings is this is Christmas cake. For me, I say this is gingerbread. It's got that spice that comes through. It's really rich. Now, if you think about a Jameson Irish whiskey, a Jameson Irish whiskey is always going to have single pot still whiskey into it. Jameson is a blended whiskey, like Chivas. Chivas is a blended Scotch. So for a blended Scotch, you need grain whiskey and you need single malt whiskey, and you blend the two together and you have a blended Scotch. Now for blended Irish whiskey, we take single pot still whiskey and we take grain whiskey. So grain whiskey, column distilled whiskey, that's going to be mainly made with corn and wheat. That's going to be distilled 3 times as well. It's going to be blended with single pot still whiskey. That's going to be malted and unmalted barley distilled 3 times, and they're going to be blended together. That's what makes blended Irish whiskey. So Tullamore Dew, Jameson, Powers, those are blended Irish whiskeys. But just to give you a little side bit of Powers, Powers was one of the first single pot still producers, and still does produce single pot still, like John's Lane or the Three Swallows, if you're a fan. Now, I've talked about this, and I want to talk about, because we're talking about Redbreast, the Irish whiskeys into the 1820s, we had Middleton. Now you had 1830s, you had pretty much Jameson ruling the world. Now, I say Jameson because Jameson and John Powers were pretty much, they had a distillery that would probably be a city block in New York. It was humongous. It was the whiskey that you would drink in Brazil. It was the whiskey that you drank anywhere in the world. This was the whiskey that the pirates would drink before they went to the New Americas and started drinking rum. These were single pot still whiskeys. This was the style. Now, all of our whiskeys are produced in a copper pot still that come from Redbreast or Green Spots or like I said, those single pot stills. Now, I show this little style of pot still that we do have. Now, for those of us that have been lucky enough to go to any distilleries, whether it's here in the Bay Area or wherever you live, if it's a small gin distillery or vodka distillery, vodka is actually a bad example because they're going to use big column stills. Let's say I live here in the Bay Area, we have St. George Distillery here. So they have beautiful copper pot stills. You can go and they're nice and beautiful, and they're big, but they're not humongous, right? If we go to and you go to Kentucky, you're going to see bigger stills. Woodford Reserve has pretty big ones, but when you look at them, you're like, okay, they're big, but they're not crazy big. You go to Scotland. Now, I work for Glenlivet. Glenlivet has some of the biggest stills in the Scottish Highlands. Our stills are humongous. I look at them and I'm like, wow, they're like, I would say 3 stories tall. All right. Now, to give you an example, when I first went to Middleton Distillery, and for any of those people that have been there, you understand, and you'll see it when I start the slides. Actually, the second slide that I show will be the stills, and they're easily 4 to 5 stories tall. They're humongous. All right, actually, let's get these pictures going. So, I think Kevin, can you? I think you need to enable me to do it. It won't let me.
Oh, all right. Let me make sure that you are.
But going into that, so the stills are humongous. They're huge. All right. I just want you to let you know that, because why does our whiskey taste so different? What's the style? Now, it's always going to come down to the master distiller talking about the copper kiss. One of the biggest questions I have is, why do distillers use copper instead of steel or even aluminum or some other metals that you can use? Copper is pretty much been used since the beginning of time. All great alchemists, which I would say are a lot of women that started, were using copper. Now, why do they use copper? Because copper actually has a process, and you guys can probably describe it better than I can, but it's going to take the sulfur away. And when it happens during distillation, is the copper sucks that sulfur into the copper, and it only washes away once you rinse out that still. Now, when you talk about making a copper pot distillation, I have to fill that pot still with my mash. Then I'm going to boil it, and I'm going to boil it at about 170 degrees. And then those vapors are going to rise, and I'm going to go, right? Now I'm going to have to clean out that stuff that I put in that still, clean the inside of it out really good before I do my next distillation. So pot still distillation is a lot of work, and people don't really think about it like that. But you're also getting very rich, compact flavors with those pot stills. Now, when you talk about a column stills are long and continuous. So it continuously does the distillation. I don't need to clean anything out. Everything's easy breezy, right? So it's easy to make a vodka. I can do that in the morning and bottle it by night. Whiskey, not so much. You got to do a lot, and it puts in a lot. So I want to explain this to you because some people don't understand how big these copper pot stills are and what the flavors that we do get. So in this 12-year-old that you're tasting, you're going to know that it's really rich, really, I like to say, unctuous. Now we're going to go into the next one, and the next one is the 12-year-old or the 15-year-old. But I want to touch upon what I have in front of me right now is the 12-year-old cask strength, which would be our next release after 12 if we're going in line. Now that's cask strength coming straight out of the cask into the bottle. Now, why do we do that? I like to say we do that because it pretty much shows us naked. It shows our spirit how it's supposed to be tasted. It shows the spirit how, if you are in our community in Cork, if you went to the distillery and bought a bottle of whiskey, they would fill it up. You would get it. You would need to go home and cut it with water, or you know, we all have different palates. Some people may like it cask strength, but either if you add a dash of water, or the more water you add, the proof's going to come down. But if you just add a drop, like I say, people are like, no water. You can do what you want, but water helps. Water is the backbone. Remember, whiskey comes from uskavaha. Uskavaha in Gaelic means water of life. Now, every whiskey, if I'm talking about Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Maker's Mark, Suntory, all of us are so proud of our water. I will tell you all about the Dungorney River that flows right underneath the Middleton Distillery. That's one of 4 different waters that we use, right? To me, I'm a big person I like to garden. So, water is important to me, and the pH balance as well is very important. So the pH balance in the Dungorney River and our springs is going to be 6.5 to 7. And for those water nerds out there, that's almost a perfect water. You're not going to have too much acidity or alkalinity that's going to make that water too much. So it's actually perfect for when you're making whiskey. This is one of the big things that we talk about in Kentucky. Kentucky's another story, but that limestone that they have coming in the springs that they have coming through Kentucky do usually about a 7 to 8 pH. So, it's a big thing, but I think it makes the whiskey very vibrant. All right. Hold on one second, because we need to slow down and take a drink. Do we have any questions about this? I don't know if we can share the screen now. Let's see if we can. Oh, there we go. Okay.
We have a number of questions rolling in. I think we'll wait to the Q&A and we can.
Okay,
you should have the ability. There you go. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah. I used my big MIT brain to figure out the settings to make sure you could
All right, let's
share
see.
your screen.
Oh, let me see if it's not letting me. Oh, never mind. Using two screens at once. All right, so this is our team. I would say this is our old team. And when I say old team, this means that it just changed 2 weeks ago. Not because they're old guys, because yeah, they are, but no, it's not. So going from Billy Layton on your far, I guess would be on your right. Billy Layton, I should say, is one of my mentors. He is going to be your master blender for Redbreast for Middleton Distilleries. So let me tell you about Billy Layton. Billy Layton's been with IDL, Irish Distillers Limited, for since 1991. He's been with the company for a long time. Now, Billy lives in the north. He lives not too far away from Bushmills Distillery, which he used to run. Now, if we go through the history of Irish whiskey as we were going through, I'm going to go up a little more into the 1950s and 60s. I'm going to slow it down because a lot of people are like, okay, so Irish whiskey was on top of the world. So what happened? Well, I mean, a lot of you know probably a lot more than I do about it, but you know, we had World War I, we had a great famine. We also had in 1831, the development of the coffee still was a big thing for single pot still. It kind of took it out because that column still makes a whiskey lighter and faster and easier to process. And people realized when they mixed that with that pot still, it made an easy drinking whiskey. Now, it was great. The whiskeys ruled the world. Jameson, Powers couldn't be bigger. And then in 1835, the Temperance Movement started in Dublin. And let me tell you, in 1824, there were 93 distilleries in Ireland, like I said. In 1840, there were 20 distilleries left because of that Temperance Movement. That wiped out a lot of distilleries and a lot of whiskeys. Now, for those of us that did survive that, then they had the famine hit. They had Easter Rising. Right after the Easter Rising, Prohibition hit. And then Prohibition hit, and American Prohibition probably ruined Irish whiskey more so than anything, because all of the people here in the United States that were making knockoff Irish bathtub whiskey were putting Irish on the label. So the people that were getting sick off this terrible Irish whiskey, fake Irish whiskey, didn't want to drink Irish whiskey anymore. Irish whiskey kind of went on a big, huge downslope. Now, it all kind of came to a reckoning in 1964 when all the families that were left, which was the Murphy family, Middleton, the Powers family, John Powers, Jameson family, John Jameson. Those are the only three families that were left in the whiskey. So they all consolidated and they formed IDL. Now in 1974, they all moved all production for every single distillery in Ireland to Middleton Distillery. That meant Bushmills, Tullamore Dew, Hattie's. All of these guys had their own distilleries, but they all consolidated to be made at one distillery, mainly because they couldn't afford. Now, these families all got together and decided that the whiskey that they were going to push around the world that was going to be their choice was John Jameson. Now, at that time in the 1960s and 70s, John Powers, and I would say actually into the 80s and early 90s, John Powers was ruling the world as far as the blended Irish whiskey went. It was actually John Powers who knocked on John Jameson's door and said, hey, you should try blending your whiskey. John Jameson died before the Jameson that we know of today even came to existence. Now, John Jameson, as a very smart man, he never sold bottles. Now, Jameson didn't start bottling their whiskey until the 1950s. That's not that long ago. So what did we do before? Well, before you just went in and you gave us barrels, we filled the barrels up and we sent them back to your bar, your restaurant, or your shop. Now, what happened was Redbreast was owned by this company called the Gilbeys. So Gilbeys, who's still around for those of you that know really bad vodka or gin or rum called Gilbey. You can probably buy it still for $20 for 3 liters. Bounces off the ground. So the Gilbey family has been around for a long time, and they had shops in London and in Dublin. Now, what they did is they at that time just dealt in fortified wines. So they would send sherry, Madeira, port barrels to the distillery. Now, at the time that Redbreast came into fruition, it was mainly made with Fino sherry and Oloroso sherry barrels. All right. So with Redbreast, I want you to always think about it. It's always going to be 2 barrels. The barrels that we use today are going to be American oak and Oloroso sherry barrels. All right. Now, saying that, why did we stop using Fino sherry? Well, for those of you that are sherry fans or know sherry or tasted sherry, you know that Fino sherry is going to be very bone dry. You have your Pedro Jimenez, you have your Palo Cortado, you have your Olorosos. You're going to get that sweeter, richer sherries as you get. Oloroso is king in whiskeys. It's going to be used within Japan, Scotland, Ireland, and here in the United States. I don't know who's drinking all this Oloroso sherry, but there's a lot of it out there. Now, at this stage in the game, we do at Redbreast use first fill American oak and first fill Oloroso sherry barrels to age our whiskeys in. Now, when I say first fill, what does that mean? Well, that means the first time that we get a barrel from the United States or from Spain, the first time that we fill it with our whiskey, it's called a first fill. Same thing in Scotland, first fill, right? So when here in the United States, the law is you have to use those bourbon barrels once. If you want, you can sell it to somebody else. So we buy it in Scotland. First time we fill it, that first fill, what's it going to do? As soon as I fill that barrel up, or if I filled it up with water, that water is going to make that wood sugar leach out. And so whatever it held in before is going to come out into that water, and it's going to give it color and flavor. Now, here in the United States, we cheat when we make our whiskey, meaning that we burn or char the inside of our barrels. Nobody else does that. We do it because of our oak. Now, if you don't know about American oak, here in my state of California, we have 56 different types of oak. In the country, we have hundreds. But American oak, if you guys look, if you even look at your oak cabinets, if you have an oak barrel in your house, you look at those staves, you'll notice that those staves grow very straight. Those grooves are as straight as can be. If you look at French oak, it has a curve to it. Japanese oak is the hardest and most porous oak in the world to work with. It is zigzagged and you can't keep anything in it. Well, they can now because they figured it out. But let me tell you how much an empty American oak barrel costs is about $200 brand new. We can talking about a brand new sherry Spanish oak barrel brand new is about $1,000 to $5,000. We talk about a brand new Japanese Mizunara oak barrel. Now so here in the United States, for anything, furniture, you have to be 125 years old to use that oak. In France, you have to be 200 years old to use French oak. Japan, it has to be 250 years old to use that tree, and the tree cannot be chopped down. It has to fall down by itself. These barrels are $10,000 to $15,000 brand new. So if you guys wonder why your Japanese whiskey are so expensive, the aging process isn't easy, and especially because Mizunara oak is something that needs very much age, whereas with Oloroso and bourbon, it's already had stuff in it before, so it's going to leach right in really quick, all right? So with that 12-year, you've got some really, really good notes. Now we're going to get into that 15-year. I'm sorry it took so long to get it there if you guys haven't drank it already. Now I'm using my 15-year because we're all out of it here in California. So for those of you that do have bottles of it, lucky you, because I can't even get it anymore. Now, also, some of you, just to let you know on a real side note, we do have new labels for Redbreast. So this is what the labels look like now. This is what they looked like before. And for some of you that are collectors, I saw that a lot of you have been drinking Redbreast, and I really appreciate that. I really think it's a wonderful thing because Redbreast has only been around the United States since 2010. We've been around in Ireland since 1912. The Gilbey family was one of many private wholesalers that sent barrels to Middleton or to Jameson, and Jameson filled them up. Now, when that came out, it said JJ and S, so John Jameson and Son, Redbreast whiskey. Why is it called Redbreast whiskey? Well, I shouldn't say CEO, but the president of the family, of the Gilbey family at the time, was an ornithologist by trade and really thought that the whiskey looked like the chest of a redbreast robin. The redbreast robin is also the only bird that winters in Ireland, and it's also, what I hear is, it sings constantly, so you really don't like it. But yes, that is Redbreast. Now, Jameson did this with a lot of private wholesalers, and one of them still exists to this day that you can still buy product from under their label. that is the kissing cousin to Redbreast, and that is going to be the spots. So for those of you that know, you have green spot, we have yellow spot. We just launched red spot last year. Same thing. So if you go to Dublin, next time you're in Dublin, if you have a chance, go to Mitchell & Sons. Mitchell & Sons is a beautiful shop, beautiful merchant shop. It's been there for over almost 200 years now. And they are pretty much in charge of the spots line. So what they did is they bought wines from around Europe, and they would send us barrels of different wines. So green spot, Oloroso sherry. Yellow spot, that's going to be Malaga. So for you, those of you that know, that's a Pedro Jimenez Muscatel dessert wine from Spain. And then our red spot is a Sicilian Marsala, and that's going to be good. And then our fourth one, which will come out next year, is going to be blue spot. So in the 1960s, when the spots was a full line, it was blue, green, yellow, and red. Blue was the youngest, being 7 years old, green 10, yellow 12, red 15. All right. So Jameson did this with a lot of different companies. So you, and it, I mean, it still goes on today. We still have a lot of whiskeys that are being sold here in the United States that are being, you know, if I want to buy a whiskey or start my own whiskey, I can go to a distiller, buy that whiskey, and put my own label on it. It's, I mean, I make it sound like it's very easy to do, but you know, you want to put some thought process into what your barrels are doing and how you're doing it, right? Now with green spot, or with the spots, I should say, it starts off those two barrels that we talked about with Redbreast, so green or Oloroso and bourbon, and then the yellow spot and the red spot and the blue spot will build off of those two. So yellow spot is a third cask of that Malaga, red spot is that third cask of Marsala. Blue spot, they haven't figured out if it's going to be a Merlot or Cabernet. They're going to let us know pretty quick, but these are some of the things. Now, for those of us that have the 15 and ready, I'm sorry I go off on these tangents, but there's a lot to say about these whiskeys because they've been around for a long time, and for a lot of people, they're brand new. And to me, I went from drinking some of the best scotches in the world to being like, you guys have no Irish whiskey. This single pot still is a whole new ballgame. And we will see that as we get up into the age. Now, this 15-year-old was first developed, if you can see, there you go, was first developed in 2005 for Les Maisons du Whisky in Paris, France. For those of you that are very big whiskey geeks like myself, you'll know that that's probably the world's best whiskey shop, or one of them. I like to always tell or remind here in the United States that we drink a lot of whiskey, but we don't drink the most whiskey in the world. That would be France, which drinks more whiskey per capita than it would be Taiwan, and then the United States. So we have a lot of drinking, but saying that, they get special releases for those countries that we don't get here in the United States. So as a collector that I know probably a lot of you are, it makes me very frustrated because there's releases that they get that I'm like, why can't we get them here? What's wrong? You know, so this one was being one of them, was the Redbreast 15 that was only made for Maison du Whisky, 2005. It was a really small release. And Billy Layton is the master blender. So when you're talking about master blenders, you're talking about a person. You have Brian Nation on your far left. Brian Nation is our master distiller. Now, master distillers, everyone thinks that they're the lead singer, the rock star. I want to be a master distiller. They're great. They're awesome. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because I really want to be a master distiller too. But the master distiller is like a farmer. He knows his one product really well. He knows the love it needs to grow and to succeed. Now, master blender, what he's going to do is take a lot of these different products that these farmers are producing and produce one continuous dish each and every time that's going to nail it, right? So meaning that Redbreast 12 being a single pot still blend and a grain whiskey blend, right? Now, those two gentlemen are in charge of distillation and blending. Then you have Kevin O'Gorman. Kevin O'Gorman, who is now, and this is what I want to talk about, he just became our master distiller. Brian Nation just left us 2 weeks ago to start his own Irish distillery here in the United States called O'Shaughnessy, which I'm very excited about because it will be the second single pot still made here in the United States. But it must have been a great offer because he left one of the greatest companies. And the gentleman to the right of Brian is Jer Buckley. Now, Jer Buckley, for all of you that have YouTube, just put his name in, and you can watch a man break down a barrel and put it back together within 5 minutes. And I'm not kidding. And he can do it by talking the whole time. It is the craziest thing. And he's a fourth generation cooper for Middleton Distillery. His father was the cooper there. It's a big family affair. Now with Brian Nation stepping out, we have Kevin O'Gorman. Kevin O'Gorman was our master of maturation. So Kevin O'Gorman traveled the world. Now with us, with any of the whiskeys that we produce at a Pernod Ricard, we have 100% control of our aging. So meaning that we have our barrels made. And if we're gonna have anything finished in it, then we season those barrels prior to us putting our whiskey into it. We don't use the barrels that they give us unless they are first fill bourbon casks. And mainly, when we do our blending, our grain whiskey that I've been talking about is exclusively going to be aged in American oak. That will never see any sherry. That will never see anything else, because that pot still is what goes crazy in those barrels. But that grain whiskey, which we use here in the United States, goes great in that American oak. So that's why they keep it going. But they have that control over it. All right. Now I just wanted to show you guys, because this is a great team. We just added another master distiller, and she's coming from our Method and Madness team. And for those of you that don't know Method and Madness just arrived on the shores of Massachusetts and California this month. So those of you that are lucky enough to find it, Method and Madness is a micro distillery within our major distillery. Now, I talked about these huge pot stills. Let's go down. Now, you can see this is the distillery. This is the campus of the distillery. Now, when I talk about the micro distillery, which you can see right there by the Dingorney, the micro distillery is probably the size of your kitchen table. Now, it is probably the smallest still I've ever seen. Now, with that still, let's talk about us as a community again. And at Middleton, we're like, hey, how about making an Irish whiskey aged in let's age it in virgin Spanish oak. So we have this one, and it's a single grain. So this is only going to be barley. Now this is going to be barley. All of our barley is coming from right on. If you look in that distance right there, those are all of our farms, and it's going to keep going. But we're going to pretty much get all of our barley within 20 miles of our distillery. So Method and Madness is a line. So this is a single grain. Here's a single pot still that's aged in French chestnut. They have another one that's aged in, what is it? It's hickory. They just released Method and Madness Gin, which is, and I asked this question right off. So is it all botanicals from Ireland? They're like, no. They're like, we want to use the best. And so working for Pernod Ricard, they went to work with Beefeater, they went to work with Plymouth, and they went to work with Monkey 47. And they found where they produced their best spices from. And they produced, it's an intense gin, but it's a gin made with about 20 different botanicals, and it's gorgeous. But these are some of the different things that we come out of. All right. So again, rambling. I shouldn't do this. We should just be drinking this 15, but I want to show you. So this is a big campus for those of you that have been to places or been to distilleries and see how you can have a few distilleries like in Kentucky next to each other. This one, not so much, but you can see it's humongous. All right, so let's keep moving along. Now let's drink the 15. Do we have any questions about it?
No, yeah, I was just going to jump in and see if you could compare and contrast the 15 to the 12. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I can. So the 12-year-old, the oldest is going to be 15 in that. So the youngest 12, oldest 15. Now for this 15-year-old is going to have single pot still that's upwards of 20 years old. Now, as we get older, we're also going to get heavier into the single pot still. So whereas for the 12-year-old, I would say it's almost 50-50 grain to single pot. Here, you're going to get about 65% more single pot still. Now, as we get older into the next one, which would be the 21, and the 21 is the one that keeps getting Whiskey of the Year for the last 3 years, at least in the top 2. That one is crazy, and that one goes up to 30 years old, the youngest being 21. And our latest release, for those of you that are really big Redbreast nerds, may have noticed that in the month of March, before shutdown, we launched the Redbreast 27. I'll talk about this in a little while. It's a lot. I'm not going to drink it. It's just something that I have to hold on to for my masters here. But I wish I could send you guys all 50 mLs of it. So we went through this. We went through the fermentation, the barley, the triple distillation. You can see some of the styles of our pot stills. We talked about maturation. see some of the sizes. If we want to sit here for a second, you can see the two types of casks for Redbreast. It gives a little more. So I would say easiest way to say an American barrel is a sherry butt is twice the size of an American barrel. And a sherry butt is the same size that you would get for a Mizunara oak cask as well. All right. Now, with this 15-year, the 15-year was one that a lot of people kind of were kind of weird about, and still are weird about when it comes to the whole portfolio of Redbreast, because it's not as rich as the 12. It's much more, I shouldn't say much more, it's a bit lighter. Now for me, I'm saying it's because they're using those 18-year-olds. With those 18-year-olds, you're going to have a little more of that depth coming through. It's not going to be so much, it's going to be, it just calms down. So when it happens, as you drink the 15, you're going to taste, and it's hard for me to describe because it's like a tropical fruit. And the way I describe it is it's like a bruised kiwi. It's a really like light citrus flavor that's at the finish of the 15. Let me. Now for also, just to keep you guys ready with everything, because a 12-year-old is what the Americans want, 40 proof or 80 proof, 40%, right? For me, or for most people that drink bourbon, we drink bourbons at 45 to 50%. We drink them at 90 proof to 100 proof. Much more body, a little stronger. That single distillation of that copper pot for bourbons comes through more in it. You can taste it because of that charred oak coming through, right? Now with the 15, with that lighter style, with that more, it's not going to be pushed through so much. It's just coming through, and it's almost, I would say it's a little more apple. Whereas you have that spice coming through with that sherry. I think what it is they're using second fill on this, so it's not going to come through as much in that first fill. We use second and first. I wouldn't say it's a 3-barrel because we're still using 2 barrels, but like it's a crazy thing when you go into the blending rooms and you watch, because it's not like I talked about Billy, but Billy is the team leader for the blenders. So once a week, every Friday, and this goes for pretty much all of our blenders that we have with Chivas Brothers, Irish Distillers. They meet once a week with all of the distillates from all of our distilleries, or what's going into the barrels. Now they have at Chivas, they'll sit with 25 different pipettes in front of them that have the new make spirit in front of it. None of them will put that whiskey or that new make spirit to their lips. They only smell it. And from the smell, they can tell you if it needs to go longer, what's off about it. And it's a team. It's a huge team, men and women that have been with the company, and they all work at the distilleries. And it's, my dream is to be on this team. I'm like, how do you get on this team? What do you do to get on this team? But they're with the pipettes, they're with water, they're adding the water to smell and to see. It's crazy to watch. But the same thing when Billy's doing it with Redbreast, he'll taste through the different barrels and see. And when I say they taste, they'll pour about this much whiskey into a big highball glass and fill that highball glass with water. And all the distillers do it. And they're like, I have to drink whiskey all day. If I drank whiskey straight all day, I couldn't do my job. So I'm like, it's kind of like a distiller's iced tea. But they can get all that flavor through, right? I mean, a lot of times when I do that now when I'm tasting new whiskeys, I'll just pour a whiskey in a glass, a lot of water, but you want to use distilled water, not your tap water. You want to use water that's, clean. So you'll get those flavor profiles. You don't want to smell chlorine or anything else that may be in there. Do we have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, can I just jump? Could you again just quickly hit on what you see as the major distinctions in flavor profile, the nose, the palate, the finish?
Yep, this is where we're going.
15 that we've tasted so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that 12, remember I said it's going to be a little more full-bodied. So if you were going to taste it, and this is another joke that I like to say, because I'm like, well, if you're used to tasting Jameson, which no one's used to tasting Jameson because they all shoot it. So if you actually drink Jameson and taste it, you'll notice that it's a really nice, light, short finish whiskey. Nothing crazy, nothing to write home about. It's actually very easy drinking. Now, that's the whole style of Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey wants it to be as smooth as possible. So that smoothness that you taste in Jameson, it's always been around. Now, they've always got that. So before World War II, no one was using American oak outside the United States. It was only because of what was going on during World War II that we started contracting our oak out to other countries. Because I can tell you during World War II, Japan wasn't going to use American oak. I can tell you that they weren't going to use European oak. So this is when they found Mizunara oak, was during World War II. Also for us, this is when the Coopers Union here in the United States started going broke. So the Coopers Union went to the US government and said, we need help, because during the 19th century, 19th century, everything was aged or stored or kept in oak or wood of some sort, right? So Coopers were it was a pretty good trade. Now, what happened was they got together, and then bourbon was pretty much forming right after that, right after Prohibition. And the laws came in saying, all right, well, bourbon has to be made with brand new American Irish oak barrels, charred to char 4, char 5. But that kind of helped out with the Coopers, and it helped out with the bourbon industry. But part of that law was saying those barrels can't be used more than once. They can be, but you just have to call it American whiskey. Can't call it bourbon whiskey, right? So most people were selling them to like Home Depot or whatever was around at that time, or just giving them to the Scots were taking them, and I started using them and realized that American oak also, I mean, we talked about the straight grain and everything, but it has the most vanilla content, more so than any other oak in the world. So everybody wants that vanilla in their whiskeys or in their tequilas or in their rums. So if it's not Scotland or Japan or Ireland buying American oak, it's Mexico or the Caribbean using it for their spirits, because like I said, that char helps bring that out. Now that char is going to come through on that single pot 12. You're going to taste it, but it's going to kind of be matched with that spice. Now, like I said, we use a first and second fill for that 15. With that 15, that's going to be that end of it. I mean, the second fill will be the end of that 15. So that's going to be a lighter style, meaning when we produce, if we go to our distillery, we're going to produce about 6 different pot stills. Each one of them is designed to be for a certain cask style. So American oak, Irish oak, we use Irish oak, Spanish oak. So I want to tell you, by law, to be a single pot still, it has to be 30% malted barley, 30% barley, and then what's the rest of that 40%? Well, that's the thing, all right? So historically wise, and you're going to have a lot of distilleries that are going to start doing this, us being one of them too, is you had oats. Everyone always talks about corn, barley, rye. No one ever talks about oat. Oat whiskey was a huge thing in the 19th century. Oat whiskey is but I mean, we've all made oatmeal and seeing how hardy those oats are. You know how hard it is to make a distillate with oats and try to clean out a pot still after you've had oats all over it? It's pretty disgusting. But it makes a delicious whiskey. So you will see companies in Ireland now using that. Now, Middleton, that would be used in the single pot still, that oat blend. People don't talk about that a lot, but that oat is part of it. But with the 15, when we go from 12, we would go the cask strength. That cask strength would be like, does anyone have cask strength that they happen to try? Kevin, you have any? So the cask strength is going to be pretty much, I call it when I'm doing my Scotch tastings, I call it Braveheart whiskey, because it's just cask strength whiskey. They want you to bring it down to what you think is palatable. So if I went to a distillery and I got cask strength whiskey, this bottle would hopefully last me a month, because I would cut it twice and make 2 bottles out of it, right? So it supposedly would bring it down to what you would think would be palatable. Now, as we get higher, if we talk about whiskeys when they were launched in the United States, Glenlivet, Jameson, they were all at 46% alcohol. Now we're at 40%, and some are even, or not lower, but 40 to like 45. 46% is I think is the best ABV for any whiskey. You're going to get all the flavor. You're going to get so much that's going to come through. If any of you have a chance to taste any whiskeys that are at 46%, besides these Irish whiskeys, especially Scotch, you'll notice the flavor profile. It just, that extra amount of alcohol really brings that flavor through. So the 15 has that backbone. So that's where I think people get mixed up. So when I'm doing my spots trainings, same thing. Green spot regular is 80 proof. When you go to yellow spot, it goes to 46 proof. Let me tell you, I had to do, and this was on what is it, Water Street in Wall Street of New York. And it was like a mafia tasting at an old steakhouse. These guys were all breaking my balls the whole time. Just like, this whiskey, blah, blah, blah. All right, but you had to talk to him. I had to talk to him a certain way to get him like to pay attention to me, because it was like a steak dinner with whiskey, and I had to talk to him about it. So we're going through these spots, and they're tasting it, and they love the green spot. They taste the yellow spot, and one guy is just like, this tastes like shit. And just starts like, how could you drink this? And I was like, okay. Hold on. Do me a favor. When I came in here, I said, I'm buying all the whiskey anyway, so it doesn't matter what you think of what I tell you about this whiskey. You're going to drink it how I tell you to drink it. And he started laughing, and he's like, okay. And I was like, all right, just add a touch of water to this whiskey. I'm not asking, don't add ice cube, don't add a lot, just add a drop. And so he did. I didn't say anything to him. Me and like a couple of his buddies that did like it watched his face, and he was like, this is delicious. I taste honey. He got it, because he was, and I was like, listen, I'm not trying to tell you how to drink whiskey, but we're going to, this is what happens when you taste it right. You can see. I'm like, now you can decipher how you want to drink this whiskey, but if you taste it correctly, then you'll understand the nuances of what this whiskey should do for you. If you're just going to cover it up in ice, then yeah, you'll never get the nuances. And that's, I'm like, sometimes you got to slow down to enjoy this. And he appreciated that. And he actually was like, I'm glad you told me that, because I would have never done that. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I have to deal with this all the time. And I understand, but it just takes the time, because I'm like, we're all professional tasters. We've been eating and drinking our whole life. It's just slowing down and thinking about it, and thinking about our experiences, right? Because like I say, some people say that I taste Christmas cake. And I'm like, well, I don't know what Christmas cake tastes like. It tastes like gingerbread to me. But it's all these flavor profiles that are descriptors that we have. Now, as we get into the next one, the loose style. Now, I know for some of the people in the flavor pack, it was 12, loose style 15. I wanted to get, because the 12s or the loose style is a little more full bodied. I wanted the Redbreast 15 to come up. The loose style, though, if you guys are ready to pour it, which is also going to be at 46%, so it should be good for you. And Kevin, you got a nice big bottle. Nice. Now the loose style, the Redbreast loose style, this came out in 2017. Now 2017, you also understand that sherry is a big part of our program for Redbreast. So we wanted to feature one of the biggest bodegas that we do work with, which is loose style. If for those of you that are sherry nerds or into sherries, loose style is one of the biggest bodegas in Jerez that you can go to, and exquisite sherries. Their barrels also are not very cheap to work with them. To even put their name on our label, believe me, blew me away, because I didn't even think it was something that we could even talk about. But we're using their Oloroso sherry. But what is this different than the other Redbreasts that are also using Oloroso sherry, right? All right. So what we're doing is, like I said, we pretty much have all control over all of our whiskey barrels. So we go to Spain, we go to Jerez, we have a cooperage there. We tell them what we want. We tell them our barrels are going to be burned over open flame. So we're not using any gas. It's a flame caused by old barrels that we just make a fire out of. We put our barrels on to toast, and it does that. But the barrels are made to our specifications, and then loose style will put their sherry into it for 3 years to what I call season. That's going to be a seasoning of a barrel. Now I want you to pay attention to this word, because you're going to see it a lot on labels, or they'll say seasoned. There's nothing wrong with seasoning, but I want you to know it means a lot different than finishing, right? A finish is going to be something that I'm using with something that has aged a long time in this barrel. So I'm going to do a rum finish. So I'm taking a rum that is aged for maybe 5 to 10 years in a barrel, and I'm going to put my whiskey into it probably for 6 to 8 months, so it gets a finish, right? If I'm doing a season, I'm taking a brand new barrel, I'm putting a wine or spirit into it to get it. If I put it, because as we talk about, as we get older, to that 27-year-old, that 27-year-old is a port cask, and that port cask has been used for 20 years. But people are like, what? And I'm like, no, but they seasoned it, so it's not going to be crazy. Like, because the first time I saw it, I was like, a 27-year-old port would make our whiskey look like Cabernet. It would be so dark and rich. But they talk now we're just doing a seasoning, so it's not going to come through so much. So I just want to let you guys know. Now, loose style, if we look at the mini bottle or the bottle that you have, this is the new label for those of you that didn't see it before. You'll notice no age statement. So what's the youngest whiskey in this bottle, right? That's everyone's question. What's the youngest whiskey in that bottle? 9 years old. 9 years old. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent here about that age statement. I always blame my companies for it, Chivas Brothers and Jameson, because if you paid attention during the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, and you or picked up a Sports Illustrated, a Cosmopolitan, a Playboy, any of those magazines, you always see all the Chivas or the Glenlivet or the Glenmorangie ads, and it was only a few of them at that time, but Glenlivet or Chivas, 12 years, nothing younger. Jameson, 7 years, nothing younger, right? So it made everyone think like, well, what's wrong with young whiskeys, right? So it's only here in the United States when I do my trainings that people, if they see a non-number, how old is it? And I'm like, I don't know, how old's Maker's Mark? How old's Woodford Reserve? Delicious whiskeys that we all drink, but you don't care how old they are, right? No one ever says anything about those. But if I bring out an Irish or a Scotch, how old is it? I'm like, even if I blind tasted you on it, you could never tell me. So, but I do like to tell people that you can tell. But what if we learned in the last 50 years since all of that marketing went through, we learned that when you do put a barrel or whiskey into a barrel, it's going to be more vibrant as it's younger. If we think about the younger people, the teenagers, they're much more vibrant than all of us. They've got a lot more life, right? So if we use some of those younger whiskeys to blend with the older whiskeys, it gives it a little more, right? So we use a younger American oak barrel. It's going to have more of that butterscotch and toffee that's coming through. It hasn't calmed down yet. It's still vibrant, right? And we mix that with a 12-year-old or even 15-year-old Oloroso, that's going to calm it down. So that's why we do that. Same thing. I mean, like a lot of, and I'm going to be very blunt and very honest with you about all of the whiskey industry here in the United States, Scotland, well, not so much Ireland, but Scotland and here, we ran out of whiskey. So for us here in the United States, we don't have to worry about it too much because age statements aren't a big thing for us. They are for certain brands, but not for main brands. Now for Scotland, if you notice Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, Macallan, Balvenie, if you guys look at your Japanese whiskeys, all of them non-age statements because we all ran out of whiskey. Now, 10 years ago, we ran out of rye whiskey here in the United States. I've been a big whiskey geek for a long time. But 10 years ago, I used to run a shop here in San Francisco, a wine and spirit shop called John Walker & Company. And we used to sell just boutique spirits. And I could only find 2 ryes for 1 year, and that was Jim Beam and Wild Turkey. Other ones were all sold out because everyone was drinking rye whiskey all of a sudden, or all the bartenders were. Now we have a plethora of rye whiskeys when we go to any shop, and they all have green labels for some reason. We can get rye whiskey everywhere, right? Well, same thing happened 7 years ago with single malts. We ran out of single malt whiskey in Scotland. People just started drinking more whiskey. It wasn't that we weren't producing any. As a company, we forecast 20 years ahead of time. Right now, we have 3 million casks in Ireland and 6 million casks in Scotland aging. That's way more people that even live in those places. But we forecasted, whereas Suntory didn't forecast because Japanese whiskey wasn't a big trend before 10, 15 years ago to where now, you know, like I said, Mizunara oak's not cheap, all this stuff. So it's very expensive. And they are now releasing things that are non-age statements. Still good whiskeys, but they need to catch up. So saying that, a lot of these non-age statements, just ask questions. Just ask questions about your whiskeys. Because, you know, like I said, there's nothing wrong with the younger whiskeys. But, you know, like I said, we're not going super young. But even if you did, if you looked at like your Lagavulin or your Lafroigs or your Bruichladdich, you'll notice in the last 3 or 4 years, they've released a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old because they know that us whiskey geeks, we like the younger whiskey. That's more flavor from that barley that's going to come through before the oak pretty much takes over too much. All right. Now for that loose style, what does that loose style have? That has a lot of spice. What do we think? This spice is coming through much more. Now, one of the things I want to bring up is it was developed for the cocktail nerds. It was developed for bartenders in cocktail bars. Making old fashions, making sours. I make a whiskey sherry cobbler with it. Now, if you know what a sherry cobbler is, a sherry cobbler is a very low alcohol drink. It's a Fino sherry based drink, but I put an ounce of this into it and it just beefs it up a little and it's delicious. Good summertime drink. And another thing is too, right now is people don't realize this, but before we were a big major industry, whiskey was a seasonal item just like your jams were. And whiskey was only made predominantly during spring and summer. So people drank whiskey during the hot months. So people are always like, it's not, summer isn't whiskey month, or whiskey season. I'm like, it is only whiskey season. That was the time when they brought out the mint juleps. Let's think about it. They brought out all kinds of, this is the time to drink. So enjoy your whiskeys. Now this Lustau, have fun with it. People always see this whiskey, and I'm glad it doesn't have an age statement on it, because it is delicious by itself. And when I'm making drinks with it, people are like, how could you do that? Because I paid for it. I can do whatever I want. But it's versatile. And I just like to show people. I'm like, you know, people were mixing drinks way before this last 20 years, and they were going crazy with Irish whiskeys. If you look at a lot of cocktail books, they were naming Jameson or Powers or Bushmills in their recipes. So this is nice to have. I know just a little history about Redbreast. Redbreast, if you've been to Ireland and been to any of the Catholic churches, you'll know that the priests, they don't usually drink wine when they're doing sacrament. Redbreast 12 is known as the priest's tipple in Ireland. It is the one thing that they used to make jokes about, because they would say they'd come in every week and buy their bottle of Redbreast 12. Now, to give you a little more about the history, it was only Redbreast for a while. We didn't have an age statement on it for the last 20 years. So, and it said, instead of single pot still, up until about 2007, it said pure pot still. All right. Now that same thing, they just want, which I like to use better as an example to describe, because it actually comes through more. Pure pot still, we're only using copper. When I say single pot still, it's single distillery, just like single malt, single, just one distillery. Pot still, that's all we're using. Malted, unmalted, that's the law. Yeah, I've been rambling. I know we have, let's see. Do we have any questions so far, Kevin?
Yeah, let's do the questions. But before that, so I come from the consulting world, where we say people can only remember 3 things if you're lucky. And when I drink whiskey, it's way less than that. So if we were to just wrap up the comparison of the 12 to the 15 to the Lustau in 3 words or less, it sounded like, let me give a shot. The 12, you would say Christmas cake spice. The 15, lighter, caramel buttery, at least what I would.
I will say, I will say, just to be consistent with every single brand that I represent, is I always talk about the base brand. So 12. So like Glenlivet 12. Glenlivet 12 will be tasted within every single mark. You'll taste that apple and pear. Same thing with Redbreast 12. You're going to taste that Christmas spice. It's just going to be a different kind of, that spice is what is Redbreast. So this is an easy way for me when I'm, okay, so this is the bartender spiel. You're sitting in front of me. What's the difference between Redbreast and Green Spot? They're both made with Oloroso, blah, blah, blah. Oh, good question, all right? Redbreast is all about the spice. We're all about that Oloroso sherry. Green Spot, we're all about that American oak. So Redbreast is going to be 75%, I would say, in the blend. I said it before, it was a different, but it's got spice will come through way more. And if you taste Green Spot, you'll taste that American oak come through way more. So that's what I like to say. If you like the American oak, you'll love. So Green Spot is considered the Johnnie, excuse me, the Pappy Van Winkle of Ireland is Green Spot. Redbreast just got crowned best Irish whiskey, or best whiskey in the world, 2020, by the International Wine and Spirits, which is the highest acclaim anyone can get. And it was only for Redbreast 12, but Middleton Distillery got best distillery in the world as well. But I would say, yeah, Redbreast, you're going to get here's some advertisements and stuff. So on your left, you can see that's our first, that's the Jameson Distillery. That huge monstrosity is the Jameson Distillery. I shouldn't say monstrosity, but you know what I mean. You can see some of the ads that we had. So you had the liqueur, and then some of the bottlings that we had in the 60s coming on in. All right, now it was relaunched in 91, even though it went dormant in 89. So it was gone for 2 years. and then they brought it back, because Redbreast in most of the 20th century was made on what is it? Jesus, I can't think right now. It was made at the Jameson Distillery, but what is that? It's what do they call that street? It's called Bow Row or something. Bow Street. There it is. It's on the label. Bow Street. So Bow Street, on one side you had Jameson, on the other side you had Powers. Now, if we talk about Redbreast going on, we have Redbreast 21. Redbreast 21 is pretty much the mother's milk. It is about $250 a bottle. It is delicious. Youngest 21, oldest 30. The newest release, like I showed, was the Redbreast 27. Youngest in there is 27. Oldest is 33. All right, now that's going to be 3 casks as well. We do in markets. We do in Massachusetts. We have the Redbreast small batch. So we made 4 releases of small batch Redbreast that were just released only in 2 markets, Massachusetts and California. Actually, Boston and California, not even the rest of Massachusetts. So that is very much a collector's item, and that only went to some, I don't know because I'm not in Boston, but it went to about 4 different shops. So you can buy bottles if they do have it still. And we did just release our 2nd edition of the Redbreast Dream Cask, which I've never tasted and never probably will smell or even see because it's like a 35-year-old. What was the Dream Cask? The first year was like a Hungarian oak. I think this year is rye. They're doing different ones and they're very old and amazing. Redbreast, you know, at this time, Middleton Distillery makes 90% of all single pot stills. So you have 2 others right now that are being currently made in Ireland. You have Teelings. So for those of you that are very familiar with Irish whiskey, I'm sure you've heard of Teelings. Teelings is a wonderful company owned by 2 brothers. Their father, John Teeling, who has been sober his whole life, never drank whiskey in his life. He started Cooley Distillery. Cooley Distillery is known for making Kilbeggan, Connemara, all different kinds of whiskeys. John Teeling's pretty much, he's very much one of the top dogs in Irish whiskey world. We do have Waterford Distillery opening in Waterford, which is going to be an hour and a half south of Dublin. And the owner of Waterford Distillery is a crazy man that wants to shake up Irish whiskey. He used to own this distillery, one of my favorite distilleries in the world, called Bruichladdich. He sold that a few years ago, and he just opened Waterford Distillery to where he's going to be producing that oat-based whiskey I was talking about, as well as single pot still, but doing it with state-of-the-art distillation technology with glass distillation. Then we have another distillery in the southwest of Ireland, southeast, Dingle, if you guys are familiar. Dingle, they are producing a gin and a vodka right now and just released their whiskey. They released a whiskey, but their single pot still should be coming out pretty soon as well. So it's very exciting times for Ireland. And like I touched on before, our distillery is very much, if you know any Irish people, you know that they're very loving and friendly people, and it doesn't change in their industry. They want to help out everyone that wants to come back because this was a thriving industry. They were at the top of the world, and hopefully they can get back there. And it seems like with Middleton's help and a few other distilleries that they're going to get there. But we have some of the greatest whiskeys coming out there, whether they're single malt, blended, single pot still, and yeah, I would just be excited. I mean, Teelings is another one that's very exciting right now. If you guys want to get someone that's crazy, that's an Irish whiskey that's, you know, it's exciting times in Ireland.
That's good you mentioned, because there were some questions about Teeling and the other Irish whiskeys.
Oh, right, cool.
I just wanted to finish the thought. If you had to go across the palette of the 3 whiskeys that we had tonight, the 12, the 15, the Lustau, and just give literally a 3-word summary of the taste of each, what would you say?
Okay, so 12 year is going to be ginger spice. Lustau, you're going to get spice, but you're going to also get that alcohol. So I would just say it's a little more richer. You're going to get more saturated spice in the 15. Now at the 15, it's going to be a little lighter, but you're still getting more of that tropical note coming in. You still get that spice in the finish, but that tropical note's going to come through. Now, like I said, I wish we could really, like someone, if anybody out there has 21 and would like to describe what it tastes like to them, I have it here, but I don't want to show it in front of everybody. It's a delicious whiskey, but when I talk about that, what I said, bruised kiwi before, that comes through so prominent. So it's really interesting because when you're going through the ages of the spots, I'm showing them, but they're over here, but you'll notice that it still has a lot of body, but it's not so full bodied as Redbreast. Redbreast is always going to be the one it has a long finish. Like that finish still goes on. Now, as you get up, so that 40 proof at the 12, it's going to be a medium to long finish. That 15-year-old longer, that loose style is much longer. The loose style, because that sherry is just kissing it more.
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of sherry coming through on the loose style. That's a fantastic whiskey. I'd like to go over to the questions portal that we had. The top question that we had voted by folks. I actually want to pause on that one because there are a lot of scattered questions about why does Irish whiskey have an E in it, and why does Scotch and Japanese whiskeys not have an E?
That's actually a great question. And it was, I said, the whiskey laws of 1980 that were passed in Ireland. One of the laws was, because it's native to Ireland, is that E is part of the law. And they wanted to be different than Scotland, so they added the E. Now here in the United States, you can, it is law in Scotland, and no, it wasn't due to, I like that story, but it wasn't due to the whiskey tax. But they just wanted to be different, because let me tell you, so Irish whiskey was thriving so much so that in 1850, they built an Irish whiskey distillery in Glasgow. It never produced. It lasted for 10 years, and that was it. But that's how big Irish whiskey was. You know, how I talked about the famine and everything else that kind of took Irish whiskey out. Scotch whiskey got brought in because of what happened with phylloxera. Now, phylloxera killed brandy and the wine production in France, but brandy was the king of the world. Scotch and Irish whiskeys were for like the people that, you know, they were the whiskey, but brandy is what the affluent drank. Everyone drank that, right? So when phylloxera hit and wiped out all the grapes, and brandy went to stuff, if you do notice, because as a proud Californian, and you look at some of those metals from the early 20th centuries, the greatest brandies were coming from California, from Corbel, from all these other bigger producers now. Palms, they're big now, but they were small producers then. But they were producing because here in California, we don't have laws saying we can only use certain grapes. So they were getting brandies that they had never tasted. But also, people weren't open to drinking these California brandies. So what happened was, because Scotch was being, or I should say brandy was being sold in all these affluent things, the thing that happened was Johnnie Walker, Chivas, they came and said, hey, listen, we can make up what you guys have lost. So one of the developments was the Johnnie Walker Swing. If you guys know the Johnnie Walker Swing, it's a bottle that you can put on a boat and it won't fall over because it rocks back and forth. You can still buy it. And so they placed this on every cruise ship. And that's kind of what happened. Same thing with Glenlivet. So Glenlivet, why is it the biggest Scotch in the world? It's because during, here in the United States, we used Pullman trains to get around. That was the way of traveling first class around the country before we started flying everywhere. And Colonel Smith, who was the proprietor of Glenlivet at the time, came to the United States and went to the Pullman company with a 50 ml bottle of Glenlivet and said, hey, I want this in every cart on your train. And they said, okay. So it was just came in, and that was happened in the 1940s, and it kind of took off from there. But yeah, so that E, going back to the E, here in the United States, you'll see like Maker's Mark uses it or doesn't use it. They just go by the classic KY. And then you'll see other companies that use it. There's no real law here in the US saying you can or not. It's when you talk to the distilleries, they say it's more based on whether their family came from Ireland or Scotland.
Oh, really? I had never heard that
Yeah.
explanation. I always wondered why Maker's Mark stood out like that.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of bourbon, the number one question we have voted out here by our folks is, what is different about Irish whiskey compared to Scotch and to bourbon? You gotta give a quick.
Okay. Scotch, malted barley, easy breezy, malted barley. All right. Now blended Scotch, that's using malted barley with that grain whiskey, so corn, wheat, just like we talked about the blended Irish. Barley in Ireland, barley in Scotland. Here, king in the United States is bourbon, or sorry, corn. So by law, the only spirit that is the United States native spirit is bourbon. By law, it can only be made here in the United States, not in just Bourbon County, because Bourbon County is a dry county. Nobody wants to make bourbon there. But you can make it anywhere in the United States. You can make it in Alaska. You can make it in Hawaii. You can make it in Puerto Rico. And it can be still called bourbon. It has to be made with 51% corn in its mash bill. All right. So 49% of that will be malted barley. Malted barley is pretty much going to be used in all whiskeys because that's what starts the enzymes up. There are 100% rye and 100% corn whiskeys, and they can still do it, just different flavor profile. But bourbons are going to be 51%. I would say predominantly bourbons are going to be 60 to 70% corn. You will get high rye ones like Four Roses or Bullet. But yeah, so that's the difference. The difference law here is charred American oak, brand new oak. Can't use those again. Scotland, it has to be aged for at least 3 years in oak with malted barley, all right? Distilled twice or 3 times. It could be distilled 2 or 3 times. I would say 95% twice. There's a couple, Auchentoshan and some of the ones in the lowlands that do it. Now, and then I talked about Ireland already. So that's going to be the difference. And then Canada doesn't have laws yet, but Canada is making some amazing rye whiskeys. And Canada was king for a while. I would say all Seagram's product came out of Hiram Walker, which if you go to Detroit and you just cross the bridge, you're right there in Toronto. Another one of the biggest facilities for whiskey production, and also amazing.
Awesome. Thanks. That was a good overview of those different categories. Could you recommend some food and snack pairings to go with whiskey? And honestly, this is a place that I struggle. I personally, if I'm having whiskey, I just have whiskey because I always like to get the flavor straight. But
I mean, people are always going to go like towards the game of steak, pork, barbecue. Like right now, I'm doing classes on whiskey and barbecue. So I talk about like finishes that you can do, whiskeys that you can drink, ways that you can enhance your ribs or whatever your meat you're using. As well as making like highballs and summer drinks, right? With Redbreast, because of the sherry, I have it with like charcuterie and cheese, and Vichy water. If you know what Vichy water is, it's a very high mineral spring water from Catalan in Spain, and it's very salty. And I'll make a Scotch or a whiskey soda with that, with having it with cheese and charcuterie, but it's delicious. But it's because I'm just using what they would do with the sherry in Spain, right? So that's the way I play off of that. Now here in the United States, when I'm going with bourbons, people are like grilled corn, grilled meats. Yeah, grilled's always great, but I mean, it's also delicious with desserts. You think of any vanilla ice creams, any apple pies. I mean, you can find a whiskey for that occasion. I mean, like even Japanese whiskeys are going to be a little lighter and not so intrusive. I almost treat them like a Riesling or Gewürztraminer, so a little more floral. So it's just, I mean, you can use them as aperitifs, as digestifs. Like when I do my Glenlivet tasting, right? So I'm like, all right, we have Founders Reserve. This is for your sessionable kind of style. You can take this to a house on the Super Bowl. You don't care if someone's drinking it in old fashions, highballs, shots, drinking it neat. Enjoy it, right? If I bring a bottle of Glenlivet 18 over to your house, no. We're going to enjoy that with like creme brulee. That's going to be like a discussion whiskey where you sit and talk. You enjoy the people that you're with. I say the older you get, you kind of want to give it a little more respect, and you don't want to kind of cover up because you want to play on the nuances, right? I like to smoke cigars too, so I'll use some of these to do it, but I also don't want to overpower it with smoke. So you just got to treat it. But with Redbreast, because of that sherry and that bourbon, you're pretty much safe, but it can overpower too much. You just want to be delicate.
We've got some folks making recommendations in the chat as well, if people want to check that out. I remember one of my most powerful whiskey and pairing experiences was a heavily sherried single malt Scotch with a dark chocolate. It was fantastic. Yeah. I think it was a Dalmore 15. Had with Richard Patterson, who is the master.
Yeah, Richard Patterson's great. So he also Dalmore also has that cigar blend, and that cigar blend is another one that I would say is almost like the Glenlivet 18 or even like the Lustau, because that's going to have a lot of that sherry influence, and those sherry is going to have like an acidity to it that it actually makes you hungry, makes you want to snack on something.
So Tom, there's a question that I think it'd be good to go over again. You mentioned, blending single pot still whiskeys together. So the question is, what does single pot still actually mean? Can you give
So
that?
that's the law. Single pot still. Single meaning one distillery. Pot still meaning I'm using just my copper pot still. But we have 3 copper pot stills, and we have to triple distill. So we have our wash still, which would be our first still. So when we do distillation into our wash still, that means that we're going to put our fermented wash in there. We're going to boil that. Those vapors are going to go up, and they're going to make an ABV, like we call it a beer, pretty much. It's going to be about 10% alcohol. All right. Now with that, we're going to take that, and that's going to go into the second still. That second still is our spirit still. Now with this second still, we pretty much, or I'm sorry, our wash still. Our wash still, we're going to know pretty much what that whiskey's going to taste like. And then we're going to cut that and take that heart into that third still, and that's what we're going to distill at a higher ABV. That second ABV will probably be about 40, and then the third one's about 70. So it goes up, and then that third distillation is what's going to make it that rich and that powerful. But it's always copper pot, and it's the biggest thing that you need to remember about single pot still is it's malted and unmalted barley, distilled 3 times in a copper pot still. The single just means one distillery.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So just saying that, just think about Irish whiskey. The basis does have to be malted barley, but so by law, I can blend any of those styles. So I can do a single grain. I can do a blended. I can do a single pot still. I can do a single malt. We do make single malt. Remember, Bushmills make single malt. We make single grains. We make all of these different ones. But if I blend any of those together, as long as it has malted barley in it, they can be called blended Irish whiskeys. All right. So you will see companies that are blending single malt with single pot still. That's still a blended Irish whiskey. All right. Now that's a whole different style. Ryder's Tears, if you guys are interested in that brand, another wonderful brand, not from our distillery, but like I said, we all have love. So that's just that style of whiskey. They're using a single malt with single pot, which is, it's delicious. So same thing, like my thing right now is single grains, right? Because people are like, single grains. Yeah, well, barley, we have a bunch of different varietals, right? So one of the distilleries I worked with, we used Triumph. Triumph is a beautiful barley. It's very floral. We don't use it anymore because it can get sick or it can get some, get mold. So they don't use it, but they used to use it a lot in pretty much from the 50s through the 80s. So Glenlivet released a single grain of it probably about 10 years ago. Still one of my favorite whiskeys because you taste it. Now you see distilleries like Glenlivet or Bruichladdich or, these very innovative distilleries that are kind of, not resting on their laurels and showing pretty much what happened before the laws were set, right? Because like Ireland has so much freedom because they can use Irish oak, they can use hickory, they can use chestnut, they can use any kind of wood. I always make the joke, I'm like, well, it can be aged in any kind of wood. Where's our plywood whiskey? Whereas, Scotch has just oak, but now it's opened it up to using not just American and European oak. Now they can use Hungarian oak. We do have Chivas Mizunara. So we do have, we're expanding here in the United States. So I work for Jefferson. So with Jefferson's, by law, we have to make bourbon. It has to be aged for us for 4 years to be called straight whiskey, right? Before we use it. Now, once it's bourbon, we can do whatever we want with it. So with Jefferson's, we buy our whiskey from 8 of the major distilleries. When we started Jefferson's, we started the same year as Pappy Van Winkle. They're best friends. They did the same thing. They bought whiskey from the 8 distilleries. They bottled it under their own names. The only thing is, everyone was like, Pappy caught on fire and went out of business for a while, so everyone thought that was the great one. Still good stuff, but I wouldn't say, what Jefferson's does is the same thing. Jefferson's was like, they started in 96. When they started, they were like, there are millions of barrels aging in Kentucky and no one's buying it. So they bought barrels. And then once it's bourbon, you can do what you want with it, right? So they age it in Cabernet barrels, or we have Jefferson's Ocean that we put on a boat that sails around the world, or we put it in Pinot Noir barrels. We've got all these different finishes, but that's something that we're doing. It's something that they've been doing in Ireland and Scotland for years. If you guys have all been paying attention and seeing these private bottlers of Signatory or Murray McDavid and seeing what they do when they release, you'll see like, oh, they have Macallan's 7-year-old that's aged in Virgin American oak. Yeah, because they started it, they bought it. They can, once they buy those barrels, they can do whatever the hell they want with it. So, it's exciting times. Whiskey, I would say Taiwan's going crazy right now. We're going to see some great whiskeys coming out of there. Australia, New Zealand. Mexico. Mexico's the next great country that's going to come out with some, and people are at Mexico. Mexico's been making whiskey for 257 years. If you think about Mexico, what do they eat more than anything? Corn. But it's more heirloom corn down there. So the style of corn, the whiskeys that are being, like if you checked out Sierra Norte, that's one that's being released. But a few, and it's all going to be corn based, and they're all copper pot distillation. So it's being made like a bourbon. It's just going to be, you got to think about it. All right. So now we're going from Scotland and Ireland, where it's very temperate, right? So we know that we can age something for 25 up to 50 years nowadays, right? If we go to Kentucky and I try, who's ever seen a 25-year-old bourbon? Who's ever seen even a 20-year-old bourbon? You see Pappies, but I mean, they're lying to you. There's no laws. But if you think about it, it's because they have a hot summer and a cold winter. So that organic oak is breathing in and out, right? That's why we don't see tequilas that are 10 years old, because if we think about it, tequila has been sitting in one barrel for 10 years. There's going to be this much left in the barrel. It's not going to be much left. So think about aging process of whiskey in Mexico. Like, it's going to be crazy. Just to give you guys a good example, we lose 2% of angel share. So for those of you that don't understand what the angel share is the evaporation of the whiskey in the barrel per year. So we lose 2% in Scotland and Ireland, 2%. So each campus that we have our barrels on, they're huge campuses, and they're each bigger than the country of Monaco. Like I said, in Scotland, 6 million barrels, right? So one of those campuses holds about some 100,000 odd amount of barrels, right? So I'm standing there with one of the managers of that campus, and he's like, just to let you know, we have like 20 different campuses, and we lose one campus every year to angel share. And I'm like, what? That's millions of dollars evaporating into the air. And it's a crazy business, because I'm like, I don't understand. This is nuts. And he's like, well, think about it. In Kentucky, he's like, it's evaporating at such a fast thing. And so Kentucky is 5% a year, right? So that's double the amount of Scotland and Ireland. Now think about just going a little more south to Mexico, how much evaporation that's going to be. So it's going to be crazy. And you're not going to get very like old whiskeys, but it's something to think about, of the new styles that you're getting in the whiskey world. It's exciting times. I'll get people to drink it all.
Absolutely. I had another question about the triple distillation. This person asked, my friends brag about triple distilled. It seems to me the taste is more from how it's aged, kind of going to your point. What's your take on what the influences are on the flavor of the whiskey?
Well, I mean, like I said before about the char and that bringing in that influence on the whiskey. The thing is like when I make cocktails and I'm telling people about finishes and stuff, the easiest way for me to do it is like, all right, so at home I make a Manhattan, where I take my coupe glass or my martini glass, and I'll just put like a dash of Islay whiskey in there, and I just and I whip it out. It's coated that glass, right? So now whatever cocktail I put in there has that smoke, and that's all I want. I want that kiss of smoke, and it's going to come through. Now, if I let that quarter ounce sit in there, that's going to impart so much more of that. Now, when we're talking about that flavor coming through in the barrels, it's pretty much who does the maturation. So we have Kevin O'Gorman for Redbreast, or for Middleton, that was in charge of our maturation process, right? So he goes and he travels around, looks at the barrels, makes sure, like, okay, so are we using first fill? How long have they been sitting there for? Are they fresh? Because if they're fresh, they're coming straight from the distillery to our distillery. Now, if they've been sitting there, because some people let them sit out, so it just depends. But I think for us, because we have such huge wood management, that the flavor does come through a lot. I mean, when they're talking about the Malaga for the yellow spot, that is going to add a lot. But I know that there also are companies that do use barrels that have been used a lot, and they'll use that barrel over and over and over again, and it does lose it. Now, if you think about it like a tea bag. Now, when you use that tea bag the first time, of course, rich, a lot of flavor, a lot of color. That second time, not so much. Third time, fourth time, you're not getting anything, right? Same thing with that barrel. Now that second time, it's still going to have some of that richness and that wood sugar, but not too much. That third time, a little too, but by the fourth time, you're just a vessel. You're just holding that spirit. Now, as a company, we can go back and char it again. We can toast it again. We can check out the staves and what the like what he's our master cooper. What he'll do is he'll just check out a stave. If there was one stave that had a hole in it or was that thinning out, they'll pull that stave out. They'll study it. They'll put that alligator char on another stave, replace it so it's perfect. Like this, it's crazy. But what I think is the flavor does come through a lot for our whiskeys. But I know, like, I've tasted some whiskeys where I don't know what they're doing, or it just doesn't come through, right? I think that some people are doing finishes, like, you know, like I talked before about the seasoning and the finishes. I was talking to someone about a whiskey the other day, and they're like, it's finished for 4 years. I'm like, that's not a finish. That's like a component. That's not a finish. That's like so long. Like, that's a big part of that whiskey. Yep. So some companies have different descriptions. I know from us and the way that I'm on the phone once a week with all of our distillers and blenders, just because we're all on the same page and they know that we're all the faces. So they need to talk to us and we need to ask them questions because people are going to come to us asking these great questions. But yeah, that does happen. And, you know, the thing is like the industry is the clientele. I mean, any of you can go online right now and Google this and don't need to listen to anything I'm saying. You can find out all this information. We have it all everywhere. But they know that we're coming out there and they want us to know as much as possible. Sometimes it's even too much because, I mean, I represent 35 different whiskeys. So, or I should say marks, not whiskeys.
Yeah, somebody actually just asked, you seem to represent all sorts of companies. I'm confused about your job.
My position is a whiskey educator for Pernod Ricard. So Pernod Ricard, our mother company, the umbrella company, which owns Absolute, Malibu, Glenlivet. So within our whiskeys, we own Chivas Brothers, we own Irish Distillers, and then we own a bunch of American distilleries. So within IDL, Irish Distillers, I represent all of the distillery or all of the whiskeys that are made at Middleton Distillery. Jameson, Powers, Redbreast, Green Spot, Middleton, on and on. Chivas Brothers, also underneath the Pernod Ricard umbrella, I represent all of their whiskeys: Ballantine, Chivas, Glenlivet, Aberlour, Longmorn, Scapa, we can go on. And then here in the United States, we have, which the ones that are newest to our portfolio are our American whiskeys. Smooth Ambler we've had for about 4 years. And then we just bought TX and Rabbit Hole and Jefferson's this last year. I'd say 9 months ago. So they're brand new to us. But yeah, I mean, before this position, my title and training, I'm a master of spirits. So I've represented Appleton Rum, I've represented El Tesoro Tequila, I've represented Mezcals, I've pretty much everything almost except, well, even vodka, yeah. I'd say Baijiu is the only thing I really haven't represented, but yeah.
I've yet to break into Baijiu myself. Someone was commenting on your description of the Angel Share, saying that in Kentucky the bourbon distilleries will tell you that the flavors from a cask vary a lot from year to year due to the different temperature fluctuations from one year to the next. But in Ireland, you don't get that kind of fluctuation from year to kind of, season to season, you get fluctuations, but year to year, the variance isn't that great. You tend to get a more consistent flavor profile in Ireland since the kinetics of the cask just aren't changing that much.
I'm loving this. I'm loving this because this is a very educated question, because it is true, because there are, like, when you're going to Kentucky and if you start in Louisville and you're in downtown Louisville, you can go to Rabbit Hole or Angel Share. And I would recommend going to both because you can see Rabbit Hole and Angel Share, both brand new facilities. But the way that Angel Share is made, it's very old school style of making whiskey. And they turn their barrels, and so they make sure. If you go to Wild Turkey, has rick houses that are from when they're produced in 1870 something. We went there one year, and I'm with Jimmy Russell, the master distiller, and I'm not a tall guy. Jimmy's not a tall guy, but both of us are like squatted down, and we're talking to each other in this rick house, and he's like, well, they weren't like us back then. They were much smaller. And this rick house was gorgeous, but it reeked of alcohol. It was like if anyone came in with a cigarette, we were all dead. But, the barrels sit there, and they just sit there, and like you said, it's seasonal. So you can see, like, yeah, if we get a crazy winter, or Kentucky gets a crazy winter, which they did 2 years ago, and some distilleries got snow that took out some of their barrels, or they get crazy summers. You're very right. So it depends on how those distilleries treat it. Wild Turkey doesn't do anything. They keep their barrels in old rick houses, and they do it the old way, right? We did a few years ago, a group of friends and I, all whiskey people, we did 9 distilleries in 36 hours in Louisville, or outside of Louisville. And this was all not just whiskey, but brandy producers, all these little producers that were in. And seeing that, so we started at Wild Turkey, and then we ended at Michter's. So at Michter's has 2 facilities in Louisville. Now there's one that's on the main street, which is right across from the baseball Louisville Slugger Museum, which I love. But that's going to be like their showpiece. It's great. It's beautiful. It's for the public. And then you can go into their facility that's probably about 10 minutes away, and that's right next door to Old Forester production. And it's a beautiful facility, but it's all modern. So you go into their rick houses, and their rick houses, it's just like an aluminum big warehouse, and it's all, they have air conditioning going in there. So they can control their air temperature. So you know that Michter's has a 20-year-old bourbon. Why do they have a 20-year-old bourbon? Because they control their air. They have all control over all of that. Now, there'll be people in Kentucky that'll be like, "No, that's cheating." I'm like, yeah, but it's progression. I mean, they see how much people are buying these whiskeys for in Scotland, and the only reason they can't do it is because of the weather. Now, yeah, they're not being true to the roots if they are controlling it, but it's interesting to see what happens. Yeah. It's the United States. The good thing about bourbon is that we do have that law, and that law is a big thing, because here in the United States, it's a big thing. I would say the most regulated spirit in the world is tequila. Now, tequila, you can't do anything without like the government being right there watching everything that you're doing. I would say Ireland and Scotland would come third, or right after that. They're very like, in tequila, you can't open, if you own the company, if I owned a distillery, I'm not allowed to open any of those barrels unless one of these CRT people are there with me. And that's a great thing, because they don't want you adding anything to it. They don't want you doing anything. They want it to be pure tequila. Same thing here. We have our laws within the bourbon industry. So a long time ago, we used to have excise guys that would live on distillery, grounds, just like we did in Scotland, and still do to this day in Ireland and Scotland. And they're the excise tax guys, right? Because you had your bonded whiskeys. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah.
I guess the other part of the question was on the Irish side. Do you see much, variation from cask to cask, or much
Yeah.
fluctuation in temperature year to
So
year?
you don't know, and I would say you don't know, because in the South, in Cork, I would say you're right about the Irish and Scotland, because it's temperate, it's pretty good all year. I mean, it is crazy, because when you're flying into Orkney, which is the North Island of Scotland, you'll notice that all the water around Orkney is turquoise. It looks like you're flying into Jamaica. It is gorgeous, and and they'll tell you there's a microclimate there. They're like, it doesn't get hot, but it gets warm for Scotland. And they're like, there's a whiskey producer there, and the barley there grows crazy, so a lot of people want it. And I was like, wow, I didn't know this, and they're like, that water is cold as heck. They're like, but it looks so gorgeous. But they would talk about how because of the barley that they grow in that part of Scotland, on the mainland of Scotland, not too far from each other, but because of the area of that jet stream. Now, something that I probably I know I touched upon it when I was talking about why we're not peated, because there are peated whiskeys in Ireland. We did used to be peated about 100 years ago. I would say Irish whiskey was peated. But you got to think about it. Same thing. All Scotch whiskeys were peated. So all the big companies anyway. So Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, all of them. Now none of us are peated, but we changed that because of the American market. Everything in whiskey is because of the American market. We don't drink the most now, but we did. And everything was developed. So why are we at 80 proof? It's because of the American palate. Why did we stop peating our whiskey in the Highlands? Because of the American palate. Americans were complaining about the smoke in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s. And it wasn't until about 20 years ago, 30 years ago that people started appreciating more of the Lafroig and Lagavulin, right? It's all these great things. I mean, you know, these whiskeys, I laugh because when I hear these stories about no one was buying any of this whiskey. And I'm like, now it's selling so much.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I'm one. We're at the 9 o'clock mark, at least here on the East Coast, which is the stated end time. Maybe I can just touch one more question because I think it's a great one.
You can, whatever you want.
Which is, if there are 3 things you want us to take away about Irish whiskey, what would you say those 3 things are?
It would be the history, just the history of Irish whiskey in general before Scotch or before American whiskey came in, and also it's not just about blended whiskey. It's not just about Jameson. It's just not about Powers or Tolman. Don't get me wrong; they're delicious whiskeys, but there's drinking whiskeys and then there's thinking whiskeys. All right, Jameson, those blended whiskeys, delicious whiskeys, but they're drinking whiskeys. You know, you're having a good time. Redbreast, Spots, even some of these Method and Madness, Powers, these are more, you're sitting with your friends, you're enjoying it. They're thinking whiskeys. People always, you know, the first time I went to Scotland, I went with a group, one of actually the blenders from on a blending team of IDL, and then a friend from Canada that's also with Pernod Ricard. We went to Scotland for the first time years ago. And we sit in this pub that we have no idea. It's just a local pub in a little town that we're in. And we go and get a beer and sit at a table, and the 3 of us are just talking. And this gentleman, like, I mean, he is about 6'5", tattooed from head to toe, slams these shot glasses on our table. And he's like, "Welcome to Scotland. Let's take a shot." And, you know, we're just like looking up at him like, "Oh, okay, let's take a shot." So, you know, but being the American that I am, I'm like, what are we drinking?
Yeah.
And he's like, "It doesn't matter. It's just whiskey. We don't call it Scotch here. It's just whiskey." You Americans hold it up and look at it. And I was laughing so much because I'm like, he's so right. He's so right. He's like, he's like, my family has been in this trade. I mean, and we met a lot of people that worked at distilleries around that area, and we drank with them. And we found out it was Dalmore 10. Dalmore 10, which I was like, hey, that's great, you know, geez, thank you, you know, but wow, you guys are just shooting this.
Yeah.
You know, but it's their point of view. And it's the same thing in Ireland, because, you know, I remember I went into a pub in Ireland and I ordered a Redbreast, and 3 people next to me were like, "Ooh, bougie." And I was like, "Oh, it's on that." No, I don't know. It looks like it was 9 pounds. It's not much. But, you know, so but it's all like, you know, I'm learning so much about it. And the thing is when you're in Ireland and you're drinking there, they do have a lot of love for the Redbreast and the Green Spots, because they're just like, man, it's just like what my dad drinks. I drink Powers. You know, everyone loves Powers. It's not even about the Jameson, it's about the Powers. But it's a great, I'm very lucky to have this job. I love it. I get to talk to people like you, great questions. And it's been interesting during these times, because I've never thought about myself as being a virtual person and doing these talks virtually, but now I've done, feels like hundreds now. But it's great because I get to reach out, and I know that this was last minute, and I'm very happy that Alex was able to connect us to, and for me to help him out doing this, because I know that he was looking forward to doing this, and he's a great storyteller. So I'm happy I got to step in.
Yeah, thank you, Dom. So everyone, we're at the formal end of the evening. If you want to take off, of course, you are welcome to do so, but I would love to have you stay with us. If you do leave, thank you so much. It's been great to have you, and I hope you can join for future events as well.